I believe everybody can see my screen right now. Please signify. Let me know you can all
Yes.
see my screen. All right, good, good, good. All right. So yesterday we actually had gone some concept into waste management, the equipment and machineries you would find regarding waste management now, which of course is in the concept of mechanical drives, lubrication systems, and maintenance. So we'll continue from where we stopped yesterday. Yesterday we spoke about gears, we spoke about the components, which gear is one of them. Is a transmission aid that allows transmit motion from one point to another, from a driver to a driven. Now, that's one among the transmission system you will find or you will have. And another is belt drive, and which is what we're about to kick off with. So everybody can still see my screen. I want to believe so. Now, just so that we are also well aware, there's quite a number of things that I wanted to pinpoint on this belt drive. However, I have dropped some links, some resources on the Google Classroom so that at your convenient time you can have a careful study of these things. However, I'll make some of the summary here and I'll still give you some further information. Then on physical session days, once we get to see these things in action, we'll work on our trainer, our mechanical drive trainer that's consolidated almost everything we'll be saying here. All right, so now let's talk about belt drives. Or let me just make the concept a little bit, brought back home. So remember, I said we have driver configurations. Any machine at all you see, usually in a complex machinery you will find in waste management, like your garbage truck, your trommels, your excuse me, your compactors, your shredders, your balers, etc. Quite a number of them are actually categorized into three subcategories. You have the driver, the transmission system, and you have the driven. So we spoke about transmission, we spoke about the driven, which is the one that requires the final and desired outcome. Now, from this year, we see that gears was the first we spoke about, and now we want to talk about belt. So we proceed to belt. Now, belt drive. Can everybody still hear me? Let me be sure.
Yes.
All right, good. Now, in belt drive power system or in belt drive power transmission, transmission occurs through friction. Now, I want you to understand that belt drive actually work in pair with pulleys. So after this session of belt drive, we're going to be talking about pulleys. So when you see a belt drive, it is to be used with a pulley or with pulleys. We have different types of belt drive. Most common you will find is the V belt drive, or rather the V belt is what you find. So the V belt sits in a V groove pulley, which in the resource I've dropped on the Google Classroom, you see some other things, some videos just to show you practical applications. But we'll still have our own discussion here. Now, the power transmission relies on the coefficient of what friction between belt and pulley. So please let us understand this thing clearly, this particular line. The power transmission, which means you are transmitting. Remember, I said that your
Yes.
transmission is just like your linking aid, an intermediary or like a middleman that connects a buyer and a vendor. So in the case of belts here, just like your gear, which is a transmission system or is a type of transmission system or a transmission component, belt also is a transmission component that works with pulley, helps us to get motion or rotary motion from our drive. What prime mover? Remember, I said anything that gives us that source of rotation is your prime mover or your driver. So from our driver, our pulley, our belt comes into play to help us link our driver to the driven. Now, I just said that the power transmission relies on the coefficient of friction between belt and pulley. Due to the design of V belt, now I'm going to use V belt as the belt is the common one. When I say V belt, so in case you are wondering what's a V belt, let me just establish that. If you remember when I pointed out about the type of grinding machine that you have for grinding paper in conventional markets, that belt that you see is the conventional V belt. We still have the imagery, but I'm just trying to work on your mental picture now. That particular belt is the V belt. Now, because of the nature of the V belt, it is to be designed, it is to be sit and is to be used with a pulley that has a V groove. Now, you consider a groove as a slot or as a guide way in which that V-shaped belt is to sit in the V groove. As a result, you have what it perfectly sitting with some level of contact surface area. Now, friction is what holds it in place together. So, and by friction, once the driver rotates, that is, once we put a pulley, Rather, I'll put the belt on the pulley, and the
Sorry,
pulley is
we
on the
can't see
driver.
anything showing on the screen. Oh,
Oh, really? Okay. Sorry. I'm coming. Okay, let me confirm that. Uh, so are you seeing anything right now?
No.
it's just the screen, like the participants.
Oh, really? Okay, just a minute. Let me see. Oh, I'm coming. I'm coming. Sorry. Let me. I'm coming. Okay. So, okay. So can we see anything now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So apologies for that. Apologies for that. Okay. So like I was saying, now this is point number one. So first off, in a belt drive power transmission, rather in a belt drive, power transmission occurs through what? Friction. Point two says what the power transmission, it relies on the coefficient of friction between the belt and the pulley. So I was establishing that the common type of pulley, common type of belt you will see is the V belt. And I said, if just to get a mental picture of what a V belt is, consider that same belt that you find on what conventional pepper grinding machine that you see in the marketplace. Now, that belt that is used to transmit between the prime mover, which is that engine that the person draws and starts, that then send rotation through a pulley, that belt that is on that pulley to the other pulley that is driven, it is called a V belt. Now, because it is V belt, it's not just V belt by name, it is V belt by design. The physical look is actually shaped as like a V. So it is to sit on a what, on a V groove. So V groove is considered is like a slot. We consider it a slot, a form of guide in which when you put that V belt, it will sit properly because it is what V shaped to receive a V belt. Remember when you did your fittings course, we did the male and the female. The male was supposed to help us to assist in such that we can have the female receive the male. Similarly, also that V groove is designed so that it will receive the V belt shape. Now, and by friction, because two of them have contact surface area, by friction, we're able to now transmit motion. When it is connected, the pulley is connected to our driver and the belt one on it. So when it is rotated or when it's in operation, the V belt will transmit motion to what? The driven or to the transmitting pulley. Remember that you can have multiple what? Multiple transmission if your desired outcome, which is a what? A driven, is not yet achieved. Now the coefficient is influenced by various factors such as the material involved, their condition, angle of contact between what? The belt and the pulley. Now, these coefficients, as I have mentioned here, the factors, the material that is involved, their condition, especially when you're using it, you're trying to manage a belt that's already worn out. If it is already worn out, remember it's being operated by friction, and friction can cause what? Wear and tear. In the course of operating with your belt and pulley, what then happens with your waste machinery system that is using what? A belt and a pulley system to transmit motion? You that is being operating this muscle in charge of this machinery, if you don't take note of all of these simple details, what can then happen is that friction will wear out your belt, and eventually the coefficient of friction that is supposed to help us transmit will be reduced. The angle of contact between the belt and the pulley, take for instance, you have V groove, just as we did measurement. V groove come in different sizes in varying distance and depth. So if you use a V belt that is not designated for a particular size, that is, there are no of matching size, the male and the female, you get if the belt and the pulley are not the angle of contact, the coefficient of friction also will be reduced. Now, excuse me. Belt drive facilitates the transfer of power from a driving component to a driven. They are used for what? Unidirectional motion transmission between what? Two shifts, meaning one direction. However, if you want to change the direction, you just have to find a way of changing the direction of your driver itself. The pulley cannot help you change direction, or the belt. It's just to change what's the direction of your driver, which you might want to use in case maybe you're using gear from a means of transmission, then to a pulley system or electrically. Now, they are flexible and what accommodate some level of misalignment. Now, like I already mentioned before, that Gear is just a type of transmission system or a transmission component. Belt also is also a type of what? Transmission component. Chain and sprocket is yet another type of transmission component. Just like I've always been saying, that I said in the mechanical measurements for weights, is that we don't necessarily have a best measuring tool. Similarly, also, we may not necessarily have a best and a preferred transmission component. Our best or suitable transmission components will be determined based on areas of application. Where do we want to use it? Why do we want to use it? So if it's area where that the machinery is operating and we want to reduce some level of shock, some level of vibration, your belt drives come in handy, because it's what? It is made out of rubber. Rubber has a good ability by its nature to absorb shock. As a result, if you have a system, a waste machinery system that has multiple pulleys and multiple belts, there's high tendency that the amount of vibration from the driver will be reduced, so that we don't have unnecessary heat, so to absorb some of the shocks. That is one of the advantages of what? Of belt drive. Similarly, also, we can also use belt drive in areas where we want to transmit torque. However, we have to buy what? A multiple pulley. We'll still talk about multiple pulley or stepped pulleys. We'll talk about that shortly when we get to pulleys. But these are what some of the areas you need to look out for. And also, if you're going to be looking out for, in case of a bit of misalignment, to accommodate for some misalignment, by the nature of belt drive, they are flexible. They are rubber. Rubber already, we know that by its nature is what? Flexible. Permits some level of what? Flexibility. So even when you have a little bit of misalignment, take for instance, when you're using your dial test indicator to measure a form of what? Height comparison, when you're using your vernier height gauge, your vernier height, your vernier height gauge to take some comparison to create alignment, and you make a mistake in the process while you're trying to align this what carry out an aligning what's called routine, alignment routine on a waste machinery system, your belt drive can give you room for what? Accommodate a little bit of misalignment. So even if there's misalignment, it will not cause what? Severe damage, either to your bearings, to your connecting shaft, or to your transmission shaft, or to your driver itself. They are rubber-like in nature and can help us reduce vibration and shock loads. That I already said. They are rubber-like in nature and can help to reduce what? Vibrations and shock load. Now, what are the types of belts? Like I already established, the main type, in short, actually, you will see more of V belts. Then the next common type of belt we see is what? Is a flat belt. So just like I said you have V belts, it stays in a what? In a V groove. Flat belt what? Stays in a what? Straight pulley, almost no groove at all, but very small, but just a small guide way to guide it. Now, what you see here, this first image, just a minute, let me put on my pointer. So now this first image you see here that is called flat is the flat belt. If you notice, it does look like as though we have something flat staying on a what? On a flat surface of that cylindrical piece. Unlike this V belt here, if you look at this V belt closely, I'm zooming in. Look at this V belt closely. It looks like as though it is sitting in properly, like it is sitting inside. So this is a what? A V belt. This here you see is a V belt, and this is not just a V belt. It's a V belt used with a what? A double or a stepped pulley. Can you see it? 1, 2, 3. So this is, if you let me zoom out again. Can you see that we have 3 V belts here? 1, 2, and 3. Everybody, please be sure you are seeing this, because I want to make a point here. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 pulleys. For these were 3 pulleys that contains a V groove for this V belt. I don't know if you just saw what I'm saying. Hello?
Yes.
All right, good. Now, why so in what situation? I would have wanted a question from you, but let me just give you the answer. So in what situation, why would you require that we use a multiple pulley and multiple belts? At what situation do we require this? Now, remember that I said with your gears, you can use your gears for what? Speed variation and what? Torque multiplication. Imagine, everybody, just imagine, let's have a mental illustration. Now, imagine that same analogy I gave you of the grinding pepper machine in the conventional market space. Just imagine that kind of belt, only that belt and the pulley. You want to drive something that is very heavy. Take for instance, you want to drive a big trommel that is loaded with an amount of waste, solid waste. If you are going to use only that one kind of pulley and in one V belt, it may not give you the full ability to transmit the motion from a driver to your driven, because now that load is very heavy, and as a matter of fact, it will require more. So the contact surface area of just one V belt is not enough. As a result, you can see that we now have we have multiple pulley to be able to allow us to transmit motion in a case where we want torque. So we want to transmit a higher torque. So take for instance, you want to buy you're the technician, or you're the person that is working on this machinery plant that involve waste processes. Then you are told to do a maintenance, carry out a maintenance activity. But for some reason they needed a bit of recommendation. Oh, gears are very expensive. What other means can we use to transmit motion from point A to point B, from the driver to the driven? Because gear by their very nature, they are very good for what? Multiplying torque and speed variation. But gears are expensive. We're also looking at cost, while we're also trying to what? Recycle waste. So then you can come up with the idea of, okay, fine, suggest that we can use what? Multiple pulley, step pulley. Hmm? Multiple pulleys can allow you to have what? Multiple belts, and they may be relatively cheaper compared to buying gears of different sizes and of what? Different numbers. Because gears, the more they increase in kg, the expensive it gets, the more expensive it gets. So you can just get a what? A multi-pulley with a what? A multi-cone pulley, and you get a what? A V belt, multiple V belts. So that's why you're having 3 years, so that you can transmit motion. So that way the torque, the amount of force, that turning force that is required to transmit from driver A to driven B, it is spread across what? Multiple contact surface areas of what? The V belt. That's why you have what? This multiple pulley uses what? V belt. You can have a single pulley and a single V belt, maybe for light and easy what's called transmitting of, or transporting of what? Of waste material, or transmitting motion from one portion to another portion that is going to be doing what? A very light amount of work. But if you want us to transmit a bit of torque, some serious amount of torque, you can have cone pulleys, rather step pulleys like this, as multiple as 5 grooves, 6 grooves, to be able to transmit enough torque. Now that's what V belt. Now that's V belt. You also have it in the case of conveyor belt. That's what they call it. This thing you're seeing here, this whole thing you're seeing here is a belt. It's called what? Conveyor belts. These are what? A means of what? Transmission. They are transmission components. Now, in the case of this conveyor here, most of the time, instead of a pulley, it's going to be used on a what? On a drum roller. A drum, or a kind of a roller that is big to transmit motion. Remember, this one will also be able to carry a good amount of waste because of what? Look at the contact surface area. The perimeter alone, length times breadth of this conveyor belt is wide, reasonably wide and long. So it also has the ability to transmit and to do quite a great number of work because of what? The amount of contact surface area. Now, we also have the modular type of belt. These are special types. You have timing belts used in engines, vehicles. You have what? Round belts. You have chain belts. These kind of belts, they're actually chain like that. You can join them, you can reduce them by removing the connecting links. Then you have what? Elevating belts. Many elevating belts. Many of us saw this in the earlier video I played before we started the class yesterday, where we're using it to transport waste that is to be recycled into a trommel. So just to recap, the types of belts: we have flat belt, V belt, timing belt, round belt, conveyor belt, modular belt, chain belt, elevating belt. Now, this modular belt, from the word modular, means you can actually add module by module. So that when I mean module by module, unit by unit, you can stack and increase the length of the belt by adding some what? Extra units. Just like I said, you're adding layers of puzzles. So if the belt is not long enough, you can add extra layers. If the belt is not enough, you can add extra modules. So it's called what? Modular belt. That's where it got the name from, called modular belt. Now, types of belts used in waste management. Belts are commonly used to handle what? And transport various types of waste material efficiently within what? Waste processing facilities. They are designed to handle challenges posed by waste material they handle, including abrasion, impact, and contamination. Here are some of them.
Sorry to cut you short. Please, there are some people on WhatsApp that are waiting to be added.
Thank you. Sorry, I got carried away trying to teach. Sorry. Okay, just a minute. Thank you for that. Thank you. Just a minute. Okay. Mr. James, are you here? Mr. James. Sorry, okay, just a minute, everybody. Please permit me. Sorry, Sweden. So of 2 minutes, 2 minutes, so that please come in. Okay, so that will be done shortly. Just a couple of minutes, please. Okay, I think somebody just joined. Thank you. I think that's Mr. Charles also Basse. Okay. Any other person that is to be admitted yet before I continue? So I please just as the class keeps on going, should you notice that I have not admitted some people, please just call my attention to it. Thank you very much for
Sylvia,
being your
you not
brother's
added
keeper.
Sylvia.
Huh?
You not added Sylvia.
Okay, CVI to be added. Okay, no problem. Okay, careful, you play though. Okay, I want to believe everybody's here already, right? Okay, I can see Sylvia. All right, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, so excuse me. Okay, good, good, good. All right, so then we can continue. Okay, Miss Linda, welcome. Let me just share my screen again. Apologies. Okay. All right. So we can all see the screen, yeah?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. So apologies for that, everyone that was in the waiting room for quite a while. So sorry about that. I got carried away teaching and I forgot to, signal. Thank you for those that have called my attention to it. Now, so let me just start from here. So I said belts are commonly used to handle and transport various type of waste materials efficiently within waste processing facilities. We already saw a similar example, like I made mention before yesterday when I played the video that showed you how waste is transmitted from one point, or transported rather, from one point to a desired point, and from that desired point also further waste processing is done, and we have different point at a different stage, different recycling activities ongoing. Now we're talking about belt. One of the principal things you also find in any waste facility where you have processes occurring, that has to do with rotation, etc., just to carry out a form of process, one or the other. Now, they are designed to handle challenges that is posed by the waste material that they handle, including abrasion. Abrasion means, so now take for instance, let me just give a simple illustration. Now, if let's take for instance, when someone take for instance somebody falls from a bike or from a rotating body, what happens is that there's a tendency that the person may have injury peels on the body. That peel is called abrasion. So abrasion in this case will be that the waste material has a tendency to want to peel the rubbers, or rather want to peel the belt, because belts are made of rubber like material. So they are designed to handle these challenges. So those abrasion, impact, and contamination, belts are designed to withstand these challenges. Now here are some of some common belts used in waste management. Number one, which you find, is rubber conveyor belt. Now for those that were not admitted at the time when I was speaking, this is just an example of belt. What I said was that you commonly will find the V belt. This particular one in this you find the nearest to this belt is flat belt. Now, if you look at this flat belt, you see that there's a prime mover here, an electric motor. One is the driver, the other one is the driven. You can see how big in diameter it is. Look at how big the machinery is. This one can transmit some level of torque. But if you want to send even more torque, the link I sent, the video link I sent, or the Google Classroom, you see police, the first one, you see police details. So that particular one, you would see applications where you have about five pulleys, stacked pulley and V belts stacked together solely for what? To be able to transmit a much higher torque. Because now, if you use only one belt, what happens is to put more strain on that belt if it's going to require great amount of work, and the contact surface area is less, because by the design of this V belt, it's supposed to sit in a V groove, and that V groove has because of that V groove, it has a contact surface area mating with the V groove and the V belt itself. So to now transmit torque, so that we can have a great number of transmission from driver to driven, we can use a multiple pulley to then use multiple V belts, so that we can transmit motion, can transmit torque at a much greater efficiency. This is a conveyor belt. This is a modular belt, and I said this modular belt gets its name from the fact that you can add more modules, more units of these belts to it. How do I mean? So take for instance, the overall length you need is 1 foot, and what you have is a 12-inch modular belt. You can add extra inch. You can, just like puzzles, bit of puzzle, you're adding puzzles. Yeah? Just imagine a block upon block. So if the belt is not enough, you will lay another one on top of it to increase the length. That's why it's called modular belt. The name modular, from the word module by modules. And you have timing belts used in engines, used in vehicles, round belt, chain belt, and elevating belt. Now this elevating belt was what we saw at the time when we were transmitting waste material in that video from one point all the way into the trommel. Is an elevating belt. Now belts are to be used alongside with pulleys. You have straight pulley in this case for flat belt, V groove pulley for or V pulleys for V belt. But in the case of conveyors, you have drummers or rollers, something like this. You look at this elevating belt, look at this white thing here. This white thing here is like the drum or rollers, as of the case of elevating belt. Now that's what brought us to that side. Now chain belt made of metal links and are well suited for handling heavy and abrasive waste. Now waste come in different type of shape, solid, different type of form, and as a matter of fact, different composition. One can be tough, one can be a strong waist, one can be very hard, just different makeups. So this chain belt is for us to even handle a much tougher and rigorous waste processes, transporting waste from one point to another. They are well suited for handling heavy and abrasive waste material, including scrap metals. So waste that can cause injury to conventional rubber belts. Instead of using that rubber belt, we will go in for using a chain belt, so that you can have longevity. Now, including scrap metals and construction debris, they are often used in recycling facilities and waste sorting system, because you just come in a waste sorting system, you drop as much waste as you want to drop. You're not doing the sorting yourself. Why do you? So the conveyor or the machine will have to now transport from one point using the chain belt those waste to another section of the waste plant or waste facility, so that they can be further carried out for processing and recycling. Belt filters or belt filter presses, they are used for porous belt to dewater and separate the liquid from sludge or organic waste materials. If you observe from what is saying, that we have different and designated kind of belt for different kind of waste. So like I said, there's not necessarily a suitable and a best preferred. It is depending on the area of what type of waste and how components. Now, these belts are designed to allow efficient drainage of liquid, making them useful in the watering process. Take for instance, now you are transporting waste material. Take for instance, waste material as cartons or papers, and they've been entrenched in waters. They've been soaked in water for some reason, or liquid waste. So we want to make that separation, separate out liquid from the waste, which is the carton or the papers or paper-like waste material. So in that case, we would rather prefer to use a belt filter. If we use a conventional rubber filter, eventually water may start seeping into the composite makeup of that rubber belt. And what then happen eventually, by virtue of operation and running, it will start peeling off and wearing off. So the best in practice to use is a belt filter. We would also not want to use a chain filter, a chain belt for waste material that contain liquid, because chain also, they are metal and have chances for rusting. So like I said again, it depends on the area of application and what type of waste are we trying to recycle in the waste facility and recycling process, that will determine what kind of belt we will choose. And like I also said, these are just quite a few number. We might have different types that are, day by day, technology keep improving and increasing. So you might have, a newer and more modern or recent belt design. But what you conventionally find are this conventional one I'm just making mention of. Elevating belt. These are designed to move waste material vertically, such as when transferring waste from one conveyor to another at different elevation within a facility. Now, if we also remember the video that I played, at some point you see a waste recycling machinery that is all the way from ground zero all the way to a reasonable height. So if we're having waste processes go from one point at a ground level to a certain height, we use elevating belt. You see different conditions for different waste processes and recycling. So those conditions, depending on the condition of give us a guide into what type of belt we would use. Note, the choice of conveyor belt in waste management, you see, just like I said, depends on factors like the type and the size of material being handled, and also the facility layout. So let's say for instance, the facility are trying to make do and trying to ensure that they utilize the space that they have maximally. So facility layout also come into play. Instead of having multiple, what's called long V belts horizontally, can't you just have a vertical one that allows us to achieve and maximize our space? And what's the specific need of the waste management process? All dependent on what you want to achieve. When you know these things, you understand their concept, you are. But some people may be guilty of trying to use a screwdriver. If you want to remove a belt, remember I said belt works in hand. So some people may want to try and remove belt that sorry, to swap. And in that case, like a rod or a stick, force it out. You reduce the tension ability that that belt can take, the load. Because remember, it's also transmitting motion. And because of transmitting motion, torque or speed, depending on how it's being configured, is also transferred alongside. What will happen if you take, for instance, it's supposed to, that belt is supposed to help us transmit waste material, let's say in total 150 kg or 200 kg. We have successfully reduced the integrity of that belt by some kg, because I've forced it beyond its tension capacity. Now, belts work in hand with pulley or sheaves. So another name for pulley is called what? Sheaves, for transmitting power. We are under belt installation. Now, how do we install? It is required that the centers of both pulleys are reduced so the belts can be worn around the pulleys. Now, the question that will come to your mind now, so what are centers, Mr. Israel? The thing is, when you're going to be working with belts, pulley, drivers, or your complex machinery, first, there are some things you have to look out for, which is in the last part of this slide. You have to look at your mounting. Everybody, listen to me. Alignment. I look at balancing. We're looking at quite a number of things, but one of them is what? Your mounting. So when you are mounting your driver, remember I said your driver is a prime mover. It can be a motor, it can be an engine, it can be a steam turbine, depending, just as long as you can get a form of what? Output rotation. Now, that thing that's going to give us rotation, whether we like it or not, from physics, there's something called what? Centripetal and centrifugal force. Now, that force, if the driver is not balanced properly, is not mounted properly, when it's in operation, that centrifugal and centripetal force will cause that thing to vibrate and move your driver from one point away from the desired point. So let's say you desire that this driver is supposed to fix on this point A, which is supposed to be mounted on a mounting foundation. And for some reason you didn't bolt it properly. Once it starts operating, the vibration, the force of centripetal and centrifugal will cause excess vibration, and as a result can tilt your driver away from the intended position. I will give you a layman example. When you run your generator, take for instance, if you have a generator, or in some cases you see where generators are mounted on tires. Why do you think they are mounted on tires? Because tires have the good ability, they are rubber, they have the ability to withstand shock. So even while the generator is rotating, operating, and vibration is occurring, the rubber is able to hold it in position so that it doesn't move from one point to another point. In that case, that is similar to what? A foundation and what? Balancing. I am giving us layman example to be able to connect what I'm saying. So if you put that generator on a rubber tire, what happens? Once it's vibrating and it's in operation, the rubber tire helps with taking the shock of the vibration, and also will prevent it from moving because of vibration from where it's not intended to be. So similarly also, in your installation of V-belts, when you want to mount your driver that is to help us with the rotation, you have to mount it. So consider that mounting foundation as your tire in the generator I just made mention of. So because we want to mount it and this thing is vibrating, we have to what? Bolt it. So when you are bolting it by design, usually your driver will give you space to what? Room in the design to adjust the amount of distance you can go to a reasonable extent. So when you adjust the distance so that the overall length is reduced, what you've successfully done is what? You have successfully reduced the center. I will show you a small animation that explains it. Now, let me just quickly show you this animation, everybody. Now, look at this. Consider this one here that you see as pulley 1, and this one as pulley 2. Now, behind this pulley 1 and pulley 2, everybody, just be with me. Look at this image here, everybody. Can we see this image? Consider this as the driven. This is the driver. The driver here, this is the driven. Consider this driven, consider this the driver with a belt. On this driver here, the foundation, what you're seeing here is the foundation. This foundation here allows us to mount the driver such that we can bolt it. Now, on that mounting foundation, there's usually an extra slot space so that we can shift this driver either forward or backward. We can push it further or bring it a little bit even backward. So if we push it further, what happens is that this overall length here that you are seeing will become reduced. And when it's reduced, what happens? I mean by what? Reducing center. If you check your resources, the link resources in the videos of belt and pulley, I made the link available there where the set of this is I explained so that you can see it. But this is what it means by reducing the center of what? Of a pulley. So your driver would have space for you to what adjust the length so that it is smaller than necessary. So when you adjust it so that the distance is lesser, the belt automatically will slack because of what it is lesser. That is what we call what reducing center, not by using stick or a form of rod to now want to pry it and remove it with force. No, you will spoil the integrity or you damage the belt what capabilities. Now, allow to sit in the what groove properly. Now, okay, let's read that again. It is required that the centers of both pulleys are reduced so that the belt can be worn around the pulley. So just like as I explained, if you want to remove a belt also, reduce the center. When you reduce the center, what then happens is that the overall length of both the driver and the driven will be shortened. As a result, the belt will slack automatically. Then you remove it. Then you place another one because of the center is still reduced. Once you've allowed the V belt or the belt to sit in the groove and is perfectly aligned, mating with the groove properly, you adjust back the center to its original size, so its original length, and you clamp it back with the bolt. What have you successfully done? Eventually, you have successfully increased back the length and tensioned the belt, and as a result, you have your what installation successfully done. Now, this installation approach can be applied when intending to remove a belt from a drive or from a driver. So similarly, like I explained, if you also want to remove the belt and change it, you have to reduce the center. Reduce center means reducing the overall length of both the driver and the driven, because on the mounting foundation, there's usually a slot created to allow you to adjust those lengths. Note, storage of belt should be effectively done to prevent stress on the belt and not leading to what breakage in its makeup. Do not hang it such that they are side loaded. Instead, they are to be folded into circle into themselves so that all across the length it is all in circles. Now, in this case here, I would advise that to also check that resources. It's very important so you can see length, so it is tension. Don't mind my my small drawing, but just let's assume that this is tension. So because you are now aware that, oh, if I want to change a belt for this recycling waste machinery on point A that helps me to transmit waste material, I want to quickly do a bit of adjustment, or I want to change the belt. Because you now know that, okay, to do that, the driver or the driven, or in short, sometimes both of them, on their mounting foundation gives us the room to be able to what to adjust their initial what center or their initial position. By adjusting them inward, and this one inward, what happens? They reduce in length. Then what is easier for us to what to remove the pulley. Now adjust the distance on the foundation, suspending the pulley, and reduce the center by bringing both pulley close to each other. Now let's look at this. Now I adjust what the center of pulley one, which is the driver. When now take this is the driver on the mounting bolt, I am able to shift the driver and I adjust pulley two. What happen eventually? This overall length, there will not be space. It will not look like a form of what? A form of excess clearance. I can now pull out the belt. Upon pulling out the belt, what will happen? I can now what? After I've worn a new belt to it, I will now adjust it back to what its original length. Then it will what properly tensioned. I don't know if you understand with what I just explained, and this most of small illustrative animation. Do we understand?
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
All right, good. So then after that, you adjust it back to the original length and you tension your belt, then you are good what to operate. Now, since pulley centers are reduced, it's then become easier, like I already said, to wear the belt around the pulley and adjust it back to its initial center, making it firm in the position with reasonable what amount of tension. Now, if the belt is the required size belt, because all belts they come in different standard and different sizes. So let's take one you want to replace or you want to buy. All belts has a code number. So you don't have to cram anything here. You don't have to keep it in your head. Just carry that same belt, take the code number, and get to a belt vendor and request. Sometimes you might, if you are not sure, you might be required to carry the belt to the place of purchase so that they can see it. They automatically know what it is. That is their specialty. So now, also, if it is the same matching belt for that pulley and that distance, the tension, once you put a new belt, the tension should be as exactly as it was before. Only if it will not be the same, only if your belt, the new belt you said is new, for some reason, maybe due to storage in the warehouse for too long, has a problem, has developed a problem, or it has what been compromised, that when you put the tension, it will become what's called less than what it was before. So what would that mean? What that would mean is that if the tension is not as accurate as it should be, once you are transmitting power, some of the power that you are supposed to transmit to rotary motion will be lost because of what the tension is not good enough. So there has to be some amount of tension so that you remember it works by friction. So when there's tension, friction can allow us to transmit that motion. And of course, when we operate for a long period of time, it will wear out because of friction. Then we'll replace again. Now, what is pulley? Just like we had gear ratio, we also have pulley ratio. Now, in the same concept, gears that have plenty teeth or much number of teeth or a larger number of teeth would mean that that same gear has a bigger diameter than maybe the driver or the driven, depending. So if you have two gears, in this case, let me show you visibly so you know we are not. Now you look at all of these gears here. It is clear that this one that has a high number of teeth here has a bigger diameter. Then this driver here, that is red one, that has a small number of teeth, has a smaller diameter. Similarly for pulley also. If you have a bigger diameter pulley and a small diameter pulley, if you have the small diameter pulley to be the driver, and the driven is the big diameter pulley, what will happen? You've successfully reduced speed, and torque will be increased because of the varying diameter. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. If you understand how gear works, as I explained today, it's very easy to get the concept of this pulley ratio. Do we understand? Do we understand?
We are trying to understand, sir.
No problem. Still be with me. So even on your physical, when you come for physical session also, I will still do a bit of small recap. But try and get some of these details so that you can connect the dots even on the day of physical meeting. Now, you see this here is a small pulley. The two of them are the same diameter, so they will basically be running at the same speed. I'm coming. Now, if you have, let's go back to that gear as an example. So everybody, imagine that these two here, they are the same diameter. For this gear, they will run on the same speed, same torque. Nothing will really change. But you see this one here, or this one that is up above, one is bigger than the other. So I'm saying that if this one that is bigger is the driven, that is this one here is the one that is sending motion to this green one that is big. On our driven, which is this green one, you will have a slow speed because before this one will take time to rotate, before this one will rotate 2 times or 3 times, before it finish rotate 2 times or 3 times, this one is still trying to struggle to rotate in one complete revolution because this is smaller. It should have rotated like 5, 6 times or even 7 times. Why is it still trying to rotate once? So what will happen? This driven will have a slow speed, and upon that slow speed, what then happens consequentially is that you have a greatly improved torque. Remember, I also said that speed to torque, the relationship is inversely proportional to one another, which means that if speed is being increased, your torque will be decreased. If torque is decreasing, speed is increasing. If torque is low, speed will be high. It is the opposite of each other. Speed and torque are opposite of each other. Just know that at the back of your mind. So now how do you tension a belt? When a belt has been successfully installed, tensioning the belt is necessary so that you can operate optimally. Now remember that I said that your belt drive works with pulley, and it uses the coefficient of friction to operate. If you have reasonable amount of tension, it will also improve that friction, that coefficient of friction, to even help us transmit our motion even better. So if you don't tension the belt, what happens? It will be rubbing. Now, so let me give you an instance. I don't know if some of you have noticed that sometimes when you enter this conventional bus, if you can be hearing some striking noise, like a rubbing noise, if the driver starts. Usually, that kind of noise that make one scratching noise that is irritating to the ear is because the belt is already out of tension. There's a belt for the engine. The engine the air. So when your belt also similarly has lost sense of grip and you are still trying to use it, remember that belt work with friction. It will start rubbing. So while your driver is rotating, trying to send motion, it will just be rubbing and it's making that striking noise that will be disturbing and hurting. So, and also because of that worn out surface, tension result will be what greatly reduced because there's no way for it to grip properly on the pulley. So that's why we're talking about belt tensioning. So even while you bought a belt and you've reduced the center and you've installed the belt, if you don't adjust it to the reasonable length and have enough tension, even if you on your driver and you send power, let's say you on your driver is producing 100% power, once you be getting to your driven maybe 50%, the remaining 50% will be lost because there is what no great amount of what friction, it will be lost. Now, how do you now do this tensioning? You will find, remember that we're talking about center and their distance. That is, like I explained before, two pulleys. Two pulleys, you find their center, reducing the one I was explaining, reducing center. So remember that their center, by their center, you can adjust it to the initial length, the pulleys. So you will now find the middle point of that belt by noting the distance. When you find the middle point that is connected across both pulleys, you depress it with your thumb as that midpoint, inward and outward, to get the total deflection, which should indicate the tension. As a matter of fact, you can use a steel rule to measure how far or a depth, but I rather prefer use a steel rule to measure the deflection inward and outward, so that way you can figure out how much of tension you've got in millimeters. Now, mind you, just because of time, also I also added some of those resources on the YouTube, the link in the classroom, so you can buttress all these points for you. Now, adjust the tension as necessary. So if you see that the tension is not enough, it's still not enough, you adjust the centers. And let's take, for instance, the waste recycling machinery is such that the distance of of driver A and driver B on their mounting boat is limited. We can't go further. You can use something called an idle pulley or an idler. It's just give extra contact surface area, depressing the belt even more. It will act like as though it's your thumb, causing that extra tension. You know, when you put your thumb in the middle point, when you remove your thumb, it comes back to its initial position. But instead, you want to keep the tension there, you just put a idler pulley, a pulley that will just depress that portion on the midpoint of the belt. So when the belt is rotating, it just stays as it should be. Then you compare the tension to the requirements stated by the manufacturer of the waste processing machinery. Because tension also helps us to be able to receive some amount of weight that the waste material it will be transporting when it's being placed on that belt, or if the belt is used to transmit conveyor system on the conveyor. Now let's talk of pulleys. Remember I said that belt and pulleys, they work hand in hand. So what are pulleys? Remember I also said that belt, the common type you will see is what? V groove belt, or V groove belt. They also have pulleys. Is designing also a grooved rim. So the definition says what? Pulleys are wheels with a grooved rim designed to guide and support belt or cables while transmitting motion and force. Remember I already said that you have belt, V belt, that is conventional type. The female, in quotes, let's consider the V belt as the male, is to mate properly in the groove of the pulley, which is like the female. So that way the pulleys, their groove can allow the V belt to be inside, so that it can sit properly and guide it, so it doesn't go off track. So when it's rotating, taking motion from the driver to the driven, it doesn't skid off. That's one of the reasons why you have it as that groove. And also the contact surface area to allow friction to be able to transmit motion. It also supports belt or cables while transmitting motion and force. So what are the types of pulley you can find? Now, you find fixed pulley, movable pulley, compound pulleys, you can have block and tackles. Now, block and tackle were used almost at those ancient times. Right now, more of you may not see much pulley like this or block and tackle, although you see they exist, but unlike those medieval and old times of old, you have block and tackle used more often. Single grooves and what multi-groove pulley. So this here you see as a what is a multiple groove pulley or multi-groove pulley. That's what I was talking about. So where you can have like one, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have like 5 belts on this what multiple pulley, transmitting to a what to a driver. So that way the belt does not cut, it doesn't take extra load. Each that the belt does not cut and does not have what unnecessary extra force stressing it if you use one belt. But in the case of multiple groove pulley, it allows you to use what multiple belts. So the load capacity is shared across what those belts. So that way, belt 1 is handling a portion of the weight, belt 2 is handling a portion of the weight, belt 3 is handling another portion of the weight, belt 5, etc. Now you have what movable pulleys, compound pulley, block and tackle, single groove and multi-groove pulley, cone pulley. Now this one here, single and multi-groove, is a multi-groove. This also is also a multi-groove, but it's a what? It's a cone pulley, like a step shape, cone pulleys. This one allows us to also what vary speed and torque. When we come for our physical session, I'll also look at this for you more extensively with our machine here. And we have what timing pulley and idler pulley. Remember I mentioned idler pulley. And I said that it also helps us. This idler pulley can also help us for what? For tensioning. In a case where we got a belt that is not equivalently the length of what we want. If our overall length from pulley 1 to pulley 2, which is driver to driven, is 30 mm, and we have 40 or 35 mm what's called V belt in length, that extra 5 mm will not allow proper transmission because it's more than required. So the belt will be slipping instead of gripping properly, to be slipping. So what happens? We can use an idler pulley that will tension it further to accommodate for that extra length. So now, application of pulleys in waste machineries. Please, we go to the Google classroom and also get those links in the resources that I've placed. It really will help you. There's almost no what's called, if I had embedded the video here, I don't want it to be too heavy. So now, conveyor system. Application of pulleys in waste machineries. You can find pulleys in systems such as conveyor system that are used for waste recycling process. Pulleys are an integral part of conveyor system used in waste sorting facility and recycling plant. They help transport waste material along a designated path, making it easier to sort, process, and move materials within the facilities, or rather the facility, if it's just a singular facility. Now, also in the use of compactors, waste compactor use pulley. You see that it use pulley to drive mechanism that compress waste materials, reducing their volume for efficient storage and transportation. That's what the compactor do, or that's what the compactor does. But in this case, we're using pulley and belt to transmit power or transmit motion to the compactor. Remember that if you want to do a good and a huge amount of work, you want to transfer a huge amount of load. Let's say this is a very big machine or a very big driven, I want to drive it. You will use multiple groove pulley so that it doesn't, if you use a single type, it will quickly break, it will quickly snap. So when you use multiple, it is able to share the weight accordingly to the number of pulleys that is available, the number of groove that is available on the pulley. Now, we'll talk about lift systems. In waste collection vehicle, pulleys are often used to lift and empty waste containers. In waste collection vehicles, pulleys are often used to lift and empty waste containers or bins into vehicle storage compartments. Remember when I said that one of the simplest but yet complex machinery you will find in waste recycling process is your garbage truck. That vehicle that goes about collecting trash, collecting waste that's to be recycled. So similarly, inside of some of your vehicle storage compartments, you also find in pulleys. Waste shredders. In waste shredding equipment, pulleys help drive rotating blade or cutting mechanism that break down waste material into smaller, more manageable pieces for further processing. Now, let us look at a what? Let's brainstorm and suggest what can be the answer for this shredder. Now, let's look at this image. Everybody, look at this image. This is a shredder. Which one? Now, a shredder can take in almost any solid physical waste, almost any solid physical waste of any material. Now, everybody looking at this shredder, what is going on inside here is what is a metal. Which would have been better to use? Is it a gear or a pulley? For this waste recycling, for this waste shredding what's called equipment, which would have been better to transmit power? A gear or a pulley? I need the answers.
A gear.
Okay, so somebody says a gear. Who else has another answer? Who else has another answer for me? GV2, I need answers. But I want to be sure you understand the principle, because what I'm saying is so that you can spot at some point where we best use a pulley, where we best use a gear. But let me go with the answer. Actually, to be that, it would have been better that we use a gear, because gear by its nature can easily and quickly help us multiply torque. But in the case it was mentioned that we use pulley to also send power to a what? To a shredder. In that case, the pulley will not be a single pulley. Do you agree with me?
Yes, yes.
Good. Good. I like that. So which means now that you're catching it. So because if we make it a single pulley, eventually there will be too much stress on that pulley and on that belt. And there will be less what contact surface area to be able to allow us transmit power, allow us transmit torque. And because this thing here, they are waste, physical solid waste that can be heavy, it can be of different magnitude, different size in weight. Imagine you're not using pulley alone or just a single pulley. It will so tell on your driver and it will tell on your transmission system. So as a result, it will be advisable that, having understood some of the concept that has to do with waste management and recycling processes and regarding machinery, it is best that if we are going to use a pulley, we use what? Multiple groove pulley, if we cannot afford in the case of getting what? Gears. And it will do the same thing by of transmitting what? Motion, and enable what? Shredding operation. Now, thank you very much for the answer. Shows you are understanding what is being discussed. Now, let's talk about chain drives. So, now before we go for that chain drive, we have two that we've made mention of. We've spoken of gears, we've spoken of belt and pulleys. Remember, I said belt work together with pulleys. So we've spoken about belt and pulley. I'll classify them as one. Now we're about to talk about another form of what? Transmission. Another aid that allows us to link driver to driven is called what? The chain drives. Now, this chain drive, there are quite a number of things to it, which I will tell you that you may not know everything once, but as time goes on and experience is being built, you will take cognizance of some of these things. But we'll make a mention of a few terminologies here. So, what is drive sprocket? Now, chain, we're talking about chain drive, but just as you have belt and pulley working hand in hand, you will have sprocket working hand in hand with chain. You cannot have chain and pulley. No. You cannot have belt and sprocket. No, it is either chain and sprocket, belt and pulleys. I repeat, chain and sprocket work hand in hand, then belt and pulleys work hand in hand. Now, chain drives. Drive sprocket, typically it is the smaller sprocket that serves as the driver, that is the driver machine, and operates what at the highest RPM among the two sprockets. If you are doing a transmission, excuse me. Now, driven sprocket. Usually, the larger sprocket of the two sprockets rotate at smaller RPM. So, if you are wondering what a sprocket is, you see this thing here is the sprocket. Sorry. This thing here you are seeing, it is what? Called the sprocket. It is where meshes with the chain or the chain links to be able to transmit motion. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. That way, it allows us to transmit what? Motion. The sprocket and the chain. Now, I would want to give us a little buttress a little more with a small video So I just want us to pay attention.
Hello, my name is Drew Beadle, and I'm a product manager with Pure Chain. Today, I'm here to demonstrate how to measure roller chain. If you have additional questions or concerns on how to measure your roller chain, feel free to reach out to us. Today in this video, we're going to go over several topics: types of roller chain, components of roller chain, and how to measure the components of the roller chain.
Sorry, can we see the screen? Can we see the video?
Yes, you can.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh,
Can
no,
everybody
we can. We can. No, it's not that audible.
Okay, it's okay. According to that, I'm coming. Um
Hello, my name is Drew Beadle, and I'm a product manager with Pure Chain. Today, I'm here to demonstrate how to measure roller chain. If you have additional questions or concerns on how to measure your roller chain, feel free to reach out to us. Today in this video, we're going to go over several topics: types of roller chain, components of roller chain, and how to measure the components of the roller chain. Roller chain can be supplied in two different styles. It can have straight side plates or figure-8 side plates, like shown here. It can also be manufactured. Roller chain, several topics: types of roller chain, components of roller chain, and how to measure the components of the roller chain. Roller chain can be supplied in two different styles. It can have straight.
so now everybody look at this thing you're seeing here. You see this thing you're seeing here, where you have two pin protruding. The external one are called side plates, SIDE plate. It can be straight and it can be this kind of figure-8 like. That's what he's saying here. They are called side plates. These are some of the things you need to take cognizance of when you're working with chain.
Side plates or figure-8 side plates, like shown here. It can also be manufactured without rollers. Pin links or outer links are made with two side plates and two.
So we can see here clearly. This here is the side plate. This one is a figure-8 type of side plate.
Pins. Roller links or inner links are made with two side plates, two bushings, and two rollers.
So this type of chain is a roller type of chain.
Are press fit into the side plates of the roller link, allowing the roller to rotate freely on top of the bushing.
So upon that you see that part that enables for rolling. That way, when it is on the sprocket, it can easily transmit. It will not cause movement of the chain to be able to rotate together with the sprocket and transmit motion. But let's continue.
Pins are press fit into the pin links. Roller chain comes in many different configurations. A few of the examples we have today with us are single pitch roller chain, double pitch roller chain, extended pitch roller chain. Another example we have today is double pitch or extended pitch chain with plastic Delrin oversized rollers. It is also offered with steel rollers. Before we start, let's make sure we use the right tools. For the most accurate and preferred method, Pure Chain recommends using a caliper, and that is what we will utilize for the remainder of this video. In order to effectively measure your chain, there are several dimensions required: pitch, roller width and roller diameter, plate height and plate thickness, pin length, and pin diameter. Pitch is the measurement from center to pin to center to pin. Roller width is the inside dimension in between roller length plates. Roller diameter is the diameter of the roller. Link plate height is measured at the widest part of the link plate. This is how we measure the thickness of the plate. The overall pin length is measured from one edge of pin to the other. This is how we measure pin diameter. Thank you for watching the video. Hopefully this gives you a good foundation on how to measure roller chain. For more information, please.
All right, so now just in case you might need to know more detail about what has been said there, We can also appreciate the concept of mechanical measurement and fitting in waste management, using those vernier caliper tools, micrometer, and everything I said in that module. Now, if you want to, if you should you need to, reference back this video, go to the Google Classroom. There's a link for it, where I drop that link so that you can see some of these details. All right, so now chain rating. The chain rating is also known as what? Recommended working load, which means there's an amount of load. Remember, torque is what? The turning force of a rotating body. So which means if we put excessive load on this thing, it will tend to want to reduce the turning force. Usually every waste recycling machinery will have what? Specifications. So the manufacturer can say, okay, this driver, it can rotate, or it can do this and so and so. It does to this either in electrical rating or in terms of mechanical output rating, in terms of rotation, that is the speed, maybe in RPM, or the horsepower. So if you put excessive, if you are going to be using a chain and sprocket drive system, if you put what's called, if you don't know what the chain rating is, sometimes you can put beyond an excessive working load on it, and as a result, what can happen? In the course of trying to transmit motion, the chain can break. And I see that some people are doing carrying out operations, or operation is ongoing in the waste cycling plant, and what happened? Train breakage because of what they've exceeded what the chain rating. That's the working load. It denotes the weight in pound or kilogram that the chain can reliably support over a prolonged duration. Typically, manufacturers specify their chain rating in terms of what? Maximum or average working load. Now, ultimate strength. Here's another terminology. This refers to what? The chain strength before it reaches what? Point of breaking. So you've overloaded the chain is still working. That's not going to ultimate strength, it's still working. But eventually, if you don't look at it, if you don't look into that situation, what then happens is that it will get to this ultimate strength, the point where at which the load, or whatever that is what's called, or rather, it gets to a point where the load, the working load, would running for a prolonged duration will cause what? The chain to break. So getting to that point where the chain it would break is called what? The ultimate strength. While this ultimate strength is not a primary factor in selecting the chain, it provides insight, and it gives us a clue into what? The chain's capacity to withstand sudden shock or rather to withstand sudden or shock loads. And what happens once they shock loaded? See, now your configuration of machines or equipment in waste recycling processes, from driver to the transmission to the driven. If or should there be a situation where there's something wrong with any of these three configuration, any other component attached to them would also suffer some of the consequences. How do I mean? If your driver is improperly aligned or is misaligned and is taking excessive load than necessary, or your transmission is carrying more than required load, that's in this case waste material, what will happen is that it will start putting stress on that transmission system. If it's a belt, it will start weakening the integrity. If it is a chain, it will start weakening the strength of the chain, causing it to get to its chain rating and almost to its ultimate strength. If it is gear, you start putting stress on the gear teeth. And what happened? Consequentially also, it will tell on the bearings. The bearing also will now take in some of the load shock that is receiving, because to spread across. So we have to be very careful when we're doing this what's called understanding the concept of how mechanical drives, principle, lubrication, and maintenance is done in waste management. We have to look at it carefully so that we don't compound problems. So now, still on chain and sprocket. So sprocket are toothed wheel used in conjunction with chain. Like I already said, just like you have what belt is to pulley, chain is to what? Sprocket. Sprocket are toothed wheels used in conjunction with train to transmit rotary motion and power. Chains and sprockets provide a positive drive which do not slip. So the fact that they mention a positive form of drive does not mean there's a negative form of drive. It's just terminal, technical diction. So chain and sprockets provide a positive form of drive which does not slip. It relies on friction greatly. The links engage with specially formed teeth on the sprocket. So the sprocket by design has specially formed teeth. Without that, it will also be difficult for us to transmit motion. Now look at this here. Is what a sprocket will see. A sprocket and a chain. Now let's talk of the chain still on chain and sprocket in waste machineries. Conveyor system. Chain and sprocket assemblies are used to drive what conveyor belt in waste sorting facility. We can use it also in waste shredders. In waste shredding equipment also, chain and sprocket drive the rotating blade or cutting mechanism into smaller, more manageable piece for further what processing or disposal. Just like we also saw that you can use belts to transmit power and motion to shredders, to some of these our waste machinery. You can also use gear, but like I also said, depending on the factors that are to be considered, will now determine if we will go for one over the other type of transmission. Also, transfer station. At transfer station where waste materials are loaded onto larger vehicles, chains and sprocket power was the equipment responsible for conveying waste into waiting trucks or rail cars for waste what processes. Now, waste to energy facilities. In waste to energy plants, chains and sprocket are used to also move waste material into what incinerator or gasification units, where they are converted into energy. Why? Now, if it is everybody, like remember I was pointing out what the areas of application where you can use this what's called transmission system. In this waste to energy facilities, that is, this facility uses waste, they utilize waste to produce what electrical energy. Now, in the case of incinerator is actually where things are being burnt. Would it be advisable to use a belt to transmit motion and as a result transmit the rotary motion to allow waste material go into the incinerator? No, right? We will not want to do that because the rubber belt most likely will melt. In that area of application, we would prefer to use what belt over rather we prefer to use chain over the use of rubber belt because chain are metallic, they are strong, and that condition of operation for waste processing, the chain can withstand a lot of heat, unlike using this belt as part of what condition. We determine our choice of selection in what selecting a transmission system for a waste processing machinery. Do we get what I just explained? Hello? Hi, are we still there?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. So it's all depends on what area of usage, where is it going to be used? We then determine what type of transmission system we are looking at. Now, remember, I spoke about your before now. We've spoken about driver, transmission, your driven. We've spoken about gear components. Spoken about that for transmission. We've spoken about that drivers are prime movers, engine, electrical motors, turbine, etc. Now on transmission system, you can have component as gears, you can have component as belt and pulleys, you can have component as well chain and sprockets. Now it's also important anything that rotates, what happens because there's a metal to metal contact, friction will be greatly increased. So we have to find a way to reduce friction so that we don't have what heat, excessive heat generated. Whether we like it or not, any machinery will not give you 100% efficiency because some will be converted to heat energy because of what friction. But to reduce that friction, so at least we can run optimally, we need components or a transmission component, not necessarily or exactly transmission component, but the aid and also assist transmission component is called what? A bearing. Bearing aids and support your transmission system. Take for instance, you put a shaft and you now mount a pulley. You want it to rotate. The entire shaft to rotate. If it doesn't rotate in a bearing, friction will be so excessive and great, and there'll be excess heat. So consider a bearing as a what? As a form of assistant. Take for instance, you have a governor, or you have a president, and you have what? Vice president. Assist what? Assisting the president. So in this case here, the bearing will be your what? Your assistant or vice president. I'm giving us what's conventional, easy layman terms to understand. While your transmission system itself will be the main president doing the main transmission, but will what require some support, some level of support to operate effectively from what component are bearing. So that's why I still tell them about the form of what transmission components. Bearings. They are mechanical drive components that support the rotating shaft or spindle. Remember, I have been spindle type of mechanical measure and fitting in waste. Spindle is anything that basically what rotates. So which means if you see a waste machinery that has something that is rotating, that rotating portion will be what's called a spindle. It can be called a spindle. And guides any component that slide over another. Remember, metal to metal contact. It guides it and also supports that rotating shaft. A bearing is designed to allow what relative motion between two separate components to occur with what the least. You see that with the least possible frictional resistance, because if friction is high, there will be problem. It will cause excess heat and other components will start what suffering some deficiencies in the machine, the waste processing machine. Now, bearings allow one part to rotate or move relative to another while minimizing friction, wear, and heat generation. They typically consist of what a stationary outer ring, a rotating inner ring, and a rolling element. So what you see inside, you know, this thing people used to call Boris. I don't know if you've heard Boris. Have any of us heard what they call Boris before? Have we heard anybody make mention of Boris before?
Yes.
Exactly. So that word, Boris, is not the correct word. It's actually called gearing. Let's say Boris is actually bearing. Bearing is the right technical word. So if you are being asked, this is actually bearing, not Boris. Boris is just what our conventional, not too educated or exposed, enlightened, service people. I will just call it Boris. It's actually bearing. So you find bearing in any waste processing machinery. In as much as there's rotation, you will need bearing. Even your driver, in the makeup of your driver, when they are building your driver has something called rotor and stator. To suspend that rotor shaft, you need a bearing. So even your driver that is even sending you rotation, that is our source of rotation, as important as how these components can be, it is needed. It is supporting a huge number of components in transmission. So that's why I made mention of it, that bearing also is a component that supports what rotating shaft or spindle, any component that slide over another. Now, number 4, yes, point number 4. They are stationary. So outside we look like as though it's stationary, but meanwhile internally you have movements. You can have movements being enabled by its design to reduce friction. Now, bearing allow one part to rotate or move relative to another while minimizing friction, wear, and heat generation. They typically consist of a stationary outer ring, a rotating inner ring, just like I said, and a rolling element. So in this case here, what I can see here, the rolling element inside here is called ball. That's how those people call it Boris. Sometimes it's not the ball, it's the cylindrical element. That's why they say what a rotating inner ring and a rolling element. In the case of it's not ball, it will be rollers. In the case of it's not roller, it will be like needle-like small diameter rollers that will be placed inside that separates the two rings and enables smooth motion. So I will explain something here. Just be with me. So before we go, let me before I start the explanation proper, let me play this video. Sorry. Can we see? Okay. Can we see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think this is not audible. Just a minute. Permit me. All right.
Where would we be without bearings? Well, the short answer is nowhere. Bearings are so much a part of our everyday life that there isn't much.
So if you look at these different bearings here, they have different makeup. They look similar, but they have different makeup. But let's continue.
We can do without them. Without bearings, there's...
So what you have inside here, internally, it is the inner race. It's called inner race. Externally, that looks like it is static. It doesn't move. Because this one, they said the bearing allows what? Allow two bodies to move relative one to another. That one will be fixed while one is rotating. This inner race here is what usually connected to our shaft. That will not allow rotation. Why this one at this external looks like as though it's static, but there's rotation ongoing inside as a result of what this ball, this rolling element you are seeing here, they are called rolling elements. Whether it is a ball, it is a needle type, or it is a cylindrical type of roller, they are all called what rolling elements. Now this rolling element have a separator, so that as it's rotating, this ball or this element here does not collide with this one, does not collide with what neighboring elements. If not, the intended purpose of bearing is to help us reduce frictional resistance. We will now even be aiding frictional resistance. So to prevent that, manufacturers in the design of bearings have suggested and look at it that we have to put a what? A separator. It is called a separator or a cage. It separates, so it's like kind of a guard. It allows them stay in that same position while there's rotation between this inner, a relative rotation between this inner race and the outer race that is static. So that way it's what we reduce friction greatly.
No way to reduce the friction between moving metal parts.
See, you see, between moving metal parts, if there's no bearing, the friction will be very high and there'll be heat, excess wear and tear, and before you know, there'll be breakdown in our waste recycling machinery. But we don't want that to happen. We want to ensure consistent waste recycling process from point A all the way to the final product.
Bearings contain tiny steel balls inside.
Now, this exploded view here better explain what I'm saying. This thing you see here is the cage. This here is the cage that goes behind. This that you are seeing is the ball, is the element or rolling element. But once you see a ball here, the most often we call it a ball, a ball type of element. Or ball bearing. You hear ball bearing, there's roller bearing. Roller bearing means what? It's actually another form of rollers instead of ball. Then this is what the external race, RACE. This here is what internal race. That's what it's called. Internal race, RACE. This is a groove that allows this ball to sit inside. Then this cage separate them so that as they are rotating, no matter the speed, this ball 1 doesn't go and interfere with ball 2. Ball 3 don't interfere with ball 4, so that there's no form of what? Friction. So what you can see here is the exploded view of what? How your bearing is being used or is being made and coupled and used in your what? In your waste recycling machinery.
That allow for parts to roll around each other as opposed to against each other. Bearings reduce stress, allow for greater energy efficiency, and enable the prolonged existence of many day-to-day appliances. There are 2 main types of bearing.
Can we see that? 2 main types of bearing, ball bearing and what? Roller bearing, which are mostly what? Cylindrical type in nature. And I will put a clear distinction. Now, if you look at this ball bearing, everybody just look at this ball bearing, look at this roller bearing. This roller bearing has what? A reasonable amount of length. So it can take in more shock than this ball bearing. This ball bearing, just a portion, because it's ball, some portion of the circumference is also will be touching on the inner race and external race. But you see this roller here, a huge number of length and a huge surface area. As a result, you can take in more type of shock loading that will be experienced on our waste recycling machineries.
Ball and roller bearings. Ball bearings.
You see, ball bearings, which means that it is ball that is the rolling element and it's inside the bearing. If it's rolling element, they say roller element, or they also give me it's a rolling element. It will be what? The cylindrical type.
Such as deep groove ball bearings, angular contact ball bearings, self-aligning ball bearings, and thrust ball bearings.
Now, these bearings here, let me play
bearings, such as deep groove ball bearings, angular contact ball bearings, self-aligning ball bearings.
Now, these 4 bearings you're seeing here, deep groove, angular contact, self-aligning, thrust bearing, they're just types of bearing. You have plenty for different applications. There's taper rolling bearing. There are many, like there are quite a number for different applications. Now, this thrust bearing, it helps us to handle what? Thrust load. We'll still talk about load, the effect of loads on a shaft and on bearing. So that way you get to understand what I'm talking about here. This thrust bearing allows for thrust. So that is, you want rotation in a vertical form. The load that is going to be on that machinery, take for instance, will be a what? It will be positioned vertically. So to reduce the friction and allow to aid transmission, to support transmission, we will need a thrust bearing to handle that vertical load in case of what? Waste recycling processes.
And thrust ball bearings. And roller bearings, such as spherical roller bearings, taper roller bearings, cylindrical roller bearings, and needle roller bearings. Different shapes and sizes, designed to bring rotation to every part of our day.
Do you see that this is a turbine? This is a windmill. You can see that this shaft inside here, there's bearing. Almost anything that rotates will need bearing. There's no way, they must need bearing. So bearing aid transmission, system.
Bearings.
Even your blender at home, this is what you just see. Your blender at home has bearing.
Different shapes and sizes, designed to bring rotation to every part of our day. Bearing.
This is a blender, the blade. Underneath it now, this kind of blender is that I tell you that use a thrust bearing. Because if you look at your blender, Take for instance, the load on your blender that is sitting on this is what is vertically mounted. So we need a truss bearing to handle that weight, that load, so that we can also reduce friction as much as possible. So similarly, also in a case where you have take for instance something like a trommel, but not exactly a trommel that is mounted vertically, or a trommel that is mounted vertically to spin vertically, we can put a truss bearing somewhere to accommodate for the load that is being placed vertically.
Creating a universe of motion so that we can get to where we need to be and do what we need to do easily. Mineral Circles Bearings, keeping the industry in motion since 1984.
All right, so now that was bearing. I believe that video was very helpful and useful. So that particular video, check your Google Classroom. There should be a link for that guides you video. Now let's proceed. Any questions so far?
Yes.
All right, so give me your question.
Okay. I think I have one or two questions to ask.
Yes.
My first question is, it's not really like a question per se, but I just want further clarification on this pulley ratio. But you are trying to compare it with gear ratio. Yeah, the gear ratio. So looking at the way the gear ratio works, we'll look at the driver and the driving.
Yes.
So to give us the ratio of the gear. And most times we look at the gear teeth, according to your explanation yesterday, the number of the teeth from the driver and the driving will give us the ratio.
Yes.
But looking at the pulley ratio, you talk about the diameter and the speed.
Yes. So let me clarify that.
Speed. So I don't know how you. I didn't really understand that.
Okay, so let me just throw more light. So basically, what we are comparing in pulley for speed ratio is just the diameter alone. The diameter, comparing the diameter of driver to the driven. If the driver is bigger in diameter and they have a very small or a smaller diameter driven, our driven will run at a higher speed.
Okay.
Yes. Then if your driver is a smaller diameter and your driven is a big or a large diameter, it will run at a lower speed but a higher torque.
Okay.
Yes, because of that distance in the circumference. There's a difference in circumference. It's wide.
Okay.
Yes. So that's basically pulley ratio. Yes, just the diameter differences. So what's your second question?
The second question is on the chain rating.
Okay.
Yes, the chain rating, like you said, it has to do with the load and all of that.
Yes.
So is it that each chain comes with its own specification so that one can determine, this is the rating of the chain and this is the specification. So when we are changing the chain.
Yes. So now this is the thing. Usually when manufacturer make chains, those now that video I played, the centers, the pitch, that video was showing what's called using vernier caliper to measure the pitches, to measure the side plates, etc. Usually by the manufacturer of those chain, they already have a specified rating for those chain. So that's why it's best when you are going to replace a chain, you take that same chain or you measure those parameters. That's the chain centers, the pitches, the thickness, and the pin or the roller. You measure that, then go to where you purchase your chain, then you get that equivalent. That equivalent was already by the manufacturer has a specified rating. So you don't want to buy another type of chain for for a sprocket just because it's looking like it's matching. You have to ensure that it's the same dimensioning. Get the dimension right. So for that dimension to be as what it is on that machinery, it has been specified by the manufacturer that this will handle certain weight, which is usually known to the manufacturers alone. So you just take that chain, you go to where you want to replace, they get those values out and they give you equivalent.
Okay.
Yes.
Then lastly, still I want to ask about this the application of the chain and the chain and the
Sprockets.
sprocket, yes. And you've also spoken about the application of pulley and
Belt.
that made the belts and the pulley. So I noticed you made mention of almost the same application. You talk about the conveyor.
Yes.
For pulley and the belts and the pulley, and you at the same time you use the same application for chain and the sprocket. So the same thing is applicable to shredders. So my question is, how does it mean that these two transmitting system work simultaneously, or one can choose which of them can drive, the components? Like if I want to drive the shredder now, or I want to drive the conveyor, will I say I'm going to use a sprocket, the chain and the sprocket, or I'm going to use the pulley and the belt and the pulley, or both of them can be used at the same time? That's just what I want to.
Basically, both of them can do the same thing. However, remember that I said they are transmission components. So, and what we said transmission was supposed to do was that it was supposed to help us link our driver to our driven. So, which means if I want to link my driver to my driven, my ultimate aim is just find a way of getting rotation from the driver to the driven. So, if I now choose to use gear, if I choose to use chain, if I choose to use belt, is at my please put off your mic, please. So if I choose to use belt, if I choose to use chain, if I choose to use gear, is at my discretion. However, there can be certain distinction that will make me say, okay, for this case, I will use a chain. And for this particular case, to transmit motion, I will use gear. For this particular instance, I will use belt. Now, one of the examples I also cited, another example I cited is that if we are using, just like where they say, we're in the waste to energy facility, that's using waste to produce energy. If I want to transmit that waste from the point where I am going to load the waste on the conveyor into the fire where we have the furnace, I would not want to use belts, even though belts can help me transmit that motion. Because when belts get to furnace, the heat of the furnace will melt the belt. In that kind of condition, it's better I use what? I use a chain. I don't know if you understand.
Yes, I understand. But the part of my question is, can both be used simultaneously in any system at all?
Yes. They can be simultaneously in any system. If you want to have multiple transmission, you can use a chain to get from your driver to your driven, then eventually find a way of connecting your shaft, then put a pulley on that shaft, use a belt and a pulley that receive motion from a chain. They can be used simultaneously. As a matter of fact, when you come on the physical session days, which I'll still communicate, you will see this. There's a combination of this pulley, using pulley and belt, and using chain and sprocket on the same drive system, on the same mechanical drive system we have here. So you can use it to transmit as however way you want to combine it. It's just like it's just like how do I say that? It's just like just a chef. The way somebody will cook one type of meal, another person will have another way to cook it, and it all will taste good. So we just want to ensure that we get a rotation from one point to another, but you can always have them used in a combined. You can combine them together in a system.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. But so this question is a practical, what's called, it's a more practical based question. That's why your physical session, when you come around, you see the distinction of what I'm talking about and how it is being used. It's not just to combine it, but how it's also being used to help you foster that what's called ideology. All right. Okay. So now we talk about we have sorry. Okay. Now we have categories of bearings, categories of bearing. So now plain bearing, also known as what, bushing or sleeve bearing. Now, this I will show you practically when you come around. Now, these plain bearings, they do not have rolling elements. Instead, they consist of a plain surface, such as a cylinder or a disc, in direct contact to the shaft. They are often used in what? In application where low speed, oscillating or intermittent motion is required. So now, if you place your palm together and slide it one over the other, that is a similar or an analogous example of a what? A plain bearing. They are in direct contact with the what? With the object, with the rotating object. Sometimes they are made of material that is what? Kind of self-lubricating, and as a result, when you have them in direct contact, by its self-lubricating nature, it's what you have what friction reduced, greatly reduced. However, they are used in areas where they are what? There's low speed, oscillating or intermittent motion. That's what called plain bearings. So if you want to just an illustration to remember, just rub your palm together. And when you're rubbing your palm together, rub it without so much pressure. You can feel some level of what? Ease when you are what? Doing that exercise of rubbing your palm together. That's an example of what plain bearing feels like in a metal to metal contact or scenario in some machineries. Now, rolling element bearing, also known as what? An anti-friction bearing, is a type of bearing that uses rolling elements to separate the stationary inner ring, also known as the inner race, which I already explained before, and the rotating outer ring, also known as the what? Outer race. Normally, like I said, the outer ring actually don't rotate. Apologies for that. Outer ring don't rotate. It's just the inner ring. These rolling elements, typically in the form of balls, which would be a ball bearing, or cylindrical rollers, which would be a what? A rolling element bearing, reduces friction and allows smooth, you see, and controlled motion between two rings. Now, the types of bearing. Here we can see this type of bearing. We can see cylindrical ball bearing and cylindrical bearings are ball bearings. You take note. I will show you all of this, how they look like. Retainer. This case here now that is looking, this brass that you are seeing here on this truss. Let me put on the pointer just a minute. So this brass that you are seeing here that is looking like gold, for this truss bearing is the retainer or the cage or separator cage. That's how they call it. And it has a what? Cylinder rollers here. This is a what? A rolling element what? Truss bearing. We will talk about this very much in detail when we come around physically. That I'll show you so you see how it works. Now, ball bearings, roller bearings, self-aligning bearings, angular contact bearings, truss bearings, cylindrical roller bearings, taper roller bearings, spherical roller bearings. These are just to mention a few. So we'll talk about it, but these are one of the ones you see more common, and they can be combined using different set of combination to give us our desired outcome. Remember, they support transmission components. It's just like your car. There's no point of car if you will not buy fuel. You will always need fuel. Yes, car is one thing, but you need fuel. So similarly also, rotation is one thing, transmission is one component. We will still need what? Bearing to support them. So all of these analogies I am using, so in case you forget, you try and use them to remember. So now you can see angular contacts bearing, taper rollers, rollers. This one is a cylindrical roller. This one you are seeing here is a truss bearing for vertical loads. This is a spherical roller, a self-aligning roller. The race can adjust itself so that it can accommodate for some level of misalignment. Excuse me. There is a ball rolling, or rather a ball bearing that has ball inside of it, ball element. All right, so that's much for bearing. We understand what bearing do and how that they support transmission component and system. So part of bearing, which I've already said before, first you have an inner race, which is number 1 here. Number 2 is the outer race. It is always stationary. Number 3 is the ball. And number 4, like I said, is either called the retainer or separator or cage. Sometimes you hear separator cage. So that the rolling ball or the rolling element don't interfere with another when transmission is what? Ongoing. Now, application of bearing also in waste management. Now, remember I already said that transmission components will need bearing. So anywhere there's transmission components, there's bearing there. You will need bearing. So in all the applications I've mentioned before, similarly that I used to transmit motion, you will find bearing. In conveyor system that convey waste management, you would always find what bearing. They are used in conveyor rollers and pulley, reducing friction as waste are being transported along the conveyor belt in sorting facilities and recycling plants. They ensure what smooth material movement and minimize wear on the conveyor. Also in your waste shredders, bearing supports the rotating shaft. Rotating shaft also helps to connect our main transmitting components. So it's on your shaft you will mount your gears, you will mount your transmission system as also your pulley and also your chain and sprocket. So shaft and bearing also, both of them support transmission system, allowing for the efficient breakdown of waste material into smaller pieces. Bearing ensure that the blade rotates what smoothly, reducing what energy consumption and wear. Like I said, if these bearings are not there, a huge number of your transmission will be converted to heat, will be wasted in the form of heat. Compactors, waste compactors use bearings in various moving parts, including the compaction mechanism and hydraulic system. Bearing minimize friction and facilitate smooth operation of this component and extending their lifespan. Once friction is so great and so much in a waste processing recycling equipment, what happen is that it will reduce the lifespan. Heat, wear and tear will be too often or too much experience on that machinery, and before long it will what break down. Now we've spoken about bearings. Just before now, we've spoken about gears, spoken about belt and pulleys. Remember, belt and pulley work together. Please do not forget. Sprocket and chain go hand in hand. In case you are forgetting how sprocket and chain looks like, remember a bicycle, conventional bicycle, that chain, the connection to your chain and how your chain transmits motion from the back wheel to the front is through what sprocket and chain. Many of us didn't notice. Or in your bike, it's chain and sprockets. That's what they use in transmitting motion. The engine is the prime mover in the case of a bike. Find a way of connecting it as the driver, then send it to what to transmit motion. Now let's talk about shaft, and we'll actually stop here because it's already 5:58. Hopefully we run at a much better pace tomorrow, and we come early. We join early so we can cover up some more things. Then we will talk about plans for our practical for the physical session. So at this point, we'll actually come to a close. This is 5:58 already. So is there any other question? Any further question? Feel free. While we still ponder on what has been said, whether we have question or not. Mr. James, are you there, please?
Yes, I am. Okay, good evening.
Good evening. All right. So, Mr. James, you have
Yes.
a few things for them. Let them know.
Okay, just to thank everybody for being a part of today's class. I know you take your time and efforts to be a part of this, and I encourage everybody to thank you very, very much for your participation. Like I said, once the classes are done, we always like encouragement to for our physical classes, and most of all these things that we have in the institute, and they're always readily. So we just hope once you're coming, safety boots or cover shoe at most, or the ladies might not have safety boots, or most of you might be coming from different areas. I think the instructor would have talked about all the things you would need while in the physical class. So they want you to come prepared and knowing you're coming to learn. Yeah, so there's no sitting on the fence on this. You've spent this time to do the go through the online class, then why not the physical class and not put your efforts into it, and take advantage of learning these things while you're here physically. I thank you all for your participation. And in the absence, if there is no question, is there any question? Or are there any questions?
Very
Are we
well.
having
Okay.
class tomorrow?
Yes,
Hello.
you would have class tomorrow.
What
Okay.
I
about
would.
repeating class?
Huh?
What about the physical class?
So yeah, so your physical class will be 2 days. So I'm going to now we also have to come to a form of agreement. I know some people want to involve Saturday, so let's look at what's feasible, how many the turnout, just like as we did for mechanical measurement, so that quite a number of people that want to get involved, actively involved. So we'll have to come to a conclusion. We'll decide that on WhatsApp, so I don't delay almost everybody. So we'll come to that conclusion on WhatsApp. Then we'll see that we have to do this. But your practical is actually 2 days. You're not cutting, you're not filing on like MMF. So it's going to be quite a brain task, understanding the piece of what I've said, then coupling and disassembling the machine and ensure that the machine that we're going to use as practical would run once you're done.
Any question? Okay. In the absence of any other question and maybe any other information, we'll pass through the WhatsApp group or the class. In the absence of any other question, I would like to close today's session and thank Mr. Israel for his edifying. Thank you for your message, for all that you've done, and I wish you all a great evening.
All right, so bye everybody. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.